Welcome back to the Somatic Strength Collective. I'm Mandy Ryle, and today we're going to tear down one of the most harmful, pervasive myths that is absolutely 100% impacting your life as someone who's living with chronic pain and also as a midlife woman who is, of course, aging. That is the idea that your body is a machine. So hear me out. I have a very vivid memory of a teacher in elementary school teaching me, and maybe you have this memory too, teaching me that the body is similar to a car. So in this lesson, she pointed out car parts and compared them to organs. She compared the joints to tires. She said that we have to take care of the parts lest they malfunction or wear out. That was the lesson. And this may seem harmless, but it's actually the cause of so much suffering. Not just your suffering, but suffering worldwide, especially in the West. So if you've ever been told that your knees are bone on bone, that your intervertebral discs are like brake pads, which get delicate and dried out after too many miles, or you've been sold the myth that our bodies just wear out as we age, you must hear this. So buckle up, settle in. I'm going to tell you why this is so awful, and I'm going to update your knowledge about it so that you can begin to transform your mind about a body that is not like a machine, but is actually wonderful, extraordinary, and most of all, adaptable. Welcome to the Somatic Strength Collective. I'm your host, Mandy Ryle, certified strength and conditioning specialist, pain care coach, and nervous system educator. This is a dedicated, compassionate space for midlife women who can hold up the sky, but feel like their bodies are falling apart. Together, we bridge clinical pain neuroscience, somatic movement education, and bone-building strength. Chronic pain is not your destiny. Let's build a robust, reliable body and replace pain with peace. Let's begin. Okay, so this way of thinking, this mechanistic view of the body, traces back hundreds of years to the scientific revolution, actually, of the 17th century. So philosophers like René Descartes compared the body to clocks and pumps and levers and like hydraulic systems. And then again, in the Industrial Revolution, when medical models began adopting the language of factory machinery, this is how we began to think of our bodies as machines. Something that is, by the way, completely false. But you see how the zeitgeist of these periods also shaped how generation upon generation of us thinks about our actual bodies and our functions and the process of aging. So here's the basic idea. If you drive a car for 100,000 miles, right, the tires are going to wear down, of course. If you run a machine continuously, the gears will degrade. They're going to need to be replaced, right? Machines do not get stronger when you put stress on them. They break down. Your body, though, is not a machine. You are a dynamic, living, biologically adaptive organism. So when a living organism is exposed to appropriate stress, it doesn't break down. It adapts. It gets stronger, denser, and more resilient. So today we're going to continue the conversation we started last week about the fear-avoidance trap. If you missed the previous episode, which was called The Number One Predictor of Chronic Pain, It's Not What Your MRI Shows, there's no worries. This episode will stand alone, but I definitely recommend that you go back and listen to that after this. So in that last episode, I spoke about a tale of two pain cycles. The avoid cycle, which is where you probably are right now, and the confront cycle. Now, I'm not expecting you, based on that information that you may have heard last week, to just wake up tomorrow with a whole new concept of pain. I'm actually going to tell you why the confront approach makes sense when you understand the science behind it. That's my goal for today. And how to get there. How I'm going to help you transform your mindset with this 6-step framework that my clients use. Because it's time for you to move beyond pain. It's time for you to move towards strength and painless function. So this episode is going to teach you why that's possible, why it's inevitable. So let's look at what biological adaptation actually means for your tissues and for your central nervous system. So unlike a car tire, when you apply mechanical load to a bone, your body activates some cells called osteoblasts. These are cells that lay down new mineral matrix and make your bones denser. This is called Wolff's law. So when you load a muscle, very similarly, it synthesizes new protein fibers and expands in cross-sectional area. That's why when you do all those biceps curls, your biceps get bigger, right? So both of these types of tissues respond to load by creating more tissue. And then here's one that might surprise you, because your tendons too, the connective tissues, also require load to heal. So research by tendon experts like Peter Malliaras, but lots of others like Jill Cook, show that when tendons, like for example your gluteal tendon, which has become a little bit of a celebrity amongst the perimenopause set, or your rotator cuff. Hello, we all have this like low-key fear about getting frozen shoulder at this age because it is so common. Both of these types of tendons, which give us particular grief in perimenopause, when they are stiff and painful and degenerated, actually respond very poorly to rest. Very poorly to rest. Complete rest actually makes them weaker, stiffer, and more sensitive. But when we load them, controlled, progressive, mechanical load is applied. That stimulus forces tendon fibers to realign and remodel. So just like we have those osteoblasts, we also have fibroblasts, which do that in our tendons. And even in our cartilage, we have chondroblasts, which help to rebuild cartilage. Yes, we can rebuild cartilage. It's just not as efficient as it is with the other tissues that we just discussed. So the takeaway here is that resting a tight joint will not fix it. Loading it smartly, though, teaches it to adapt, which the result, of course, is that we can use it without pain. And that's what we're really after, right? So tissue adaptation, though, is only half the story. Your nervous system is just as adaptive thanks to a process known as neuroplasticity. So your brain is constantly adapting its threat algorithms based on the signals that you are feeding it. We've talked about this a fair amount on this relaunch of the podcast, right? So if you feed your brain signals of fear and bracing and avoidance, your nervous system adapts by becoming hyper-reactive. It turns up the volume on pain alarms and it shrinks that movement tolerance. So now, even though maybe you used to go running all the time before, now you can barely walk upstairs, right? That is how the nervous system has adapted, right? But if you feed your nervous system microdoses of safe, mindful movement, it adapts in the opposite direction. It lowers that autonomic arousal. It updates its threat gating. It unflags all those movements as dangerous. So here is the truth. The absolute truth of life. You are always adapting. You're always adapting. Whether you're noticing it, whether you feel it or not. The question is, are you adapting towards stiffness and fear and pain, or towards strength and increased capacity and freedom and confidence? In which direction are you currently adapting? Well, that brings us to a tale of two healing cycles. I referenced this last week. So there appear to be, based on the literature, especially by Johan Valian from 1995, there appear to be two distinct pathways that people take after an initial injury or pain episode. And if you want more information about this, we talked a bit about it in the last week's episode 5, I think, of this season. So let's go into this scenario here. Imagine that someone hurts their lower back lifting a heavy box. In this cycle 1, this confront cycle, we're calling it, the person feels pain, of course, but they recognize that it's normal and it is a temporary part of biological healing. They rest just enough for a day or two, but then they resume light walking and normal daily movement because they don't view the pain as catastrophic. Their nervous system stays calm, the tissue remodels, the brain unflags the threat, and they heal and they move on with their life. A life without pain, a life without limitation, a life without fear. Now here's cycle 2. This is the avoidance cycle that we've been talking about. Imagine a second person who gets the same exact injury, but this person has heard scary medical terms like slip disc or bone on bone or degenerative disc disease. So of course, they interpret the pain as a sign that they've hurt themselves. They interpret it as a sign of severe structural damage. So they stop bending, they stop walking, of course, right? They brace their core like a shield. They move like their body is made of glass. And by the way, next week's episode is a practice where we're going to be exploring these movements specifically. We're going to explore how you are reacting to movements of the trunk, because I want to kind of bring all of this information from these last 2 episodes together and let you experience it in an embodied way. So, because in this avoidance cycle, the brain perceives movement as dangerous, the nervous system enters hypervigilance. The surrounding muscles lock down. Of course they do, right? Believe it or not, your muscles are listening to your thoughts, feelings, and beliefs. And so this locking down is almost like a perpetual muscle guarding spasm to protect the area. Tell me if this sounds familiar. Is your head nodding? Yeah, you've experienced that, right? So over months and years, this avoidance leads to physical deconditioning, systemic hypersensitivity, which is why pain spreads. It leads to social isolation and an endless cycle of these pain flare-ups that have you so confused. So if you recognize yourself in the avoidance cycle, cycle 2, please know this. This is not a personal failure. There's nothing wrong with you. It's not in your head. Your brain is simply trying to keep you safe using an overprotective algorithm. So how do we actually get out of avoidance and back into this confront cycle? Let me walk you through this 6-step roadmap. So to transition out of all this movement avoidance and rebuild the tissue capacity safely, my clients follow a systematic 6-step process. I have brought hundreds of people through this process to great success, and I'm going to teach it to you right now. And by the way, I'm also going to offer a really comprehensive resource at the end of this episode. It's actually my eBook, which is going to go into greater detail. It's actually going to take you step by step through with different practices and stuff, okay? So I'm going to tell you about that at the end of the episode. But for now, let me kind of outline it for you. So the first step in my process is education. Because you cannot heal what you are terrified of. The very first step is learning how pain actually works in the nervous system, in the body. Understanding that pain is an alarm generated by the brain. It's not a direct measurement of tissue damage. So when you understand pain neuroscience, you strip away the panic that fuels the threat alarm. And so everybody starts with pain neuroscience education. And one of the main things that I tell my clients is that, one of their main concerns when they start coming to me is like, she's going to make me move my body and I'm afraid to move my body, right? Pain neuroscience education helps you to determine what is safe for you. So it's not guessing. It's not, rolling the dice every time you move that you may or may not flare. Pain neuroscience education is that insurance that I know what is safe for me in this moment. So the next step is awareness, and this goes hand in hand with that education. So once we've kind of calmed things down and we understand that we're not likely to hurt ourselves in movements, even movements that are painful, we begin to cultivate deep, embodied awareness, or something called interoception. So this means learning to observe the sensations in your back or your hips or your knees or in your gut neutrally. So one way we do this is, instead of immediately just feeling the knee and saying, oh, tweak my knee's going to flare. Instead, we start to evaluate with less loaded inputs, things like the temperature of the knee. What is the shape of the sensation that you're experiencing? What is the size of it? Instead of just tight or aching or tweaky. And this helps my clients to evaluate without slipping into emotional stories, without slipping into the drama of, oh, I've damaged something, or I just can't take long car rides anymore, or sitting at my desk all day hurts me, or how long am I going to be miserable with this thing, right? All of those stories are harmful. And so learning to perceive the body, tuning into more accurate sensory data information, primes the brain and the nervous system for perceiving the state of the tissues not as fixed or vulnerable, but as dynamic, ever-changing, and eventually as safe. Step 3, graded exposure. This is where I use my somatic movement education. So we reintroduce movement in tiny, non-threatening micro doses. Slow, playful, exploratory lessons allow you to move those feared joints, like, bending or twisting your spine. Again, we're going to talk about this. We're going to do an actual practice on this next week in a safe, low-load environment, in positions which are divorced from the contexts that your brain associates with danger, like unloading the dishwasher, for example, or walking upstairs. We can do those exact same movements in ways that don't trigger that conditioned response. And this re-educates the sensory motor cortex and proves to your brain that movement is safe and fun and it feels good. So that was step 3. Step 4, we need to start to address all factors. No pain care process is gonna work without this, even though this is the stuff that nobody else looks at, right? So pain doesn't exist in a vacuum. High stress, poor sleep, nutrient deficiencies, systemic inflammation are all like pouring water into your nervous system's stress bucket, which lowers your pain threshold and increases the chance that very small things will lead to a flare. When that pain bucket is almost full, it doesn't take much at all to overflow it. So we have to start to take things out of that stress bucket or make the stress bucket bigger. So in this step, in step 4, we address sleep hygiene, stress regulation, thoughts, beliefs, feelings. We start to incorporate anti-inflammatory habits to widen your body's capacity to handle physical stress. That's what I talk about when I say we need to increase the size of the pain bucket. In step 5, this is the challenge phase. So once your nervous system understands that movement is safe, it's time to get strong. It's time to recondition those tissues. So we start to introduce progressive overload, which we talked about in episode 4, I believe. We gradually add movement, physical resistance, maybe some weights, mechanical load to build muscle mass, increase bone density, and strengthen tendons. But most of all, this proves to your unified self that you are robust, you are resilient, you are capable. All of these things are happening at the same time, and teaching your systems that you do not have to live with this uncertainty, with this pain, with this suffering. And then in step 6, we build a personalized pain care plan. So life happens, okay? Stress spikes will occur. Flares happen. Step 6 ensures that you have a clear blueprint so that if a flare up ever pops up in the future, which, spoiler alert, I will tell you this, as someone who's been working with people in pain for about 20 years, flares will happen. They're going to happen. And when they happen, the pain care plan ensures that you don't panic or fall back into avoidance. You don't just end up right back where you started, right? You're just simply going to use your plan. You're going to deploy your toolkit. You're going to down-regulate your system. You're going to stay on track. You're going to keep moving. And you're going to get past that flare. So when you realize that your body is not a machine, it's not broken, that it is in fact an adaptive organism, everything changes. So if you're like my typical client, you've tried everything to overcome your pain issue. You already know that there's something deeper at work because they've fixed the joint. There's nothing more they can do to the joint. You know that something other than just your joints or tightness or muscle things, right? You know there's something besides that. And you understand that stress, and since last week, hopefully, fear is playing a big role. But you don't know where to start to unravel this. You're ready and willing to put in the time and effort. You would love to dedicate yourself to something that actually moves the needle for once, but you need a process. So like I said before, I'm not going to leave you hanging. So I just outlined the process for you, but I'm also going to walk you through this framework step by step in my free ebook. It's called The Move Beyond Pain and Perimenopause Roadmap. And it's not just some kind of little fluff opt-in. It is a very comprehensive roadmap. We're going to learn about this process. It's going to pull you through with prompts, with practices. It's going to tell you how to apply this 6-step roadmap directly to your daily routine, because what you need is a process that fits into your life. It's going to help you understand how these hormonal shifts in midlife are impacting muscle, bone, and nervous system recovery. And I've linked to all kinds of practices and demonstrations, foundational somatic practices that are specific to your pain condition. You can download your free copy of the Move Beyond Pain and Perimenopause Roadmap right now. Like literally you could be reading it in seconds by clicking the link at the top of the show notes. So thank you, as always, for listening. Keep honoring your body's amazing capacity to adapt. And I'll see you next week for a practice that will help you embody all of this new information.